Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I've got quite a lot to say. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah? So I will start right at the beginning. I'm an architect and teach here at the University of Brighton School of Architecture. I also do research and I write books and curate events. And Green Architecture Day for a long time has been one of the, as far as I'm concerned, the best event that tackles issues of environmentally friendly design in the world of and architecture. But what I'm really interested in is this, hence the badge, the not so hidden consequences of humans manufacturing and just existing on planet Earth. This is a bit of protected rainforest. It's actually really part of the supply chain for the construction industry because that's illegal mines extracting minerals that we use in construction, and those are the people doing it. These people are part of the supply chain. This is what you embark upon when you decide to study architecture and go in the construction industry. Meanwhile, we've lost these species last year, and we're losing hundreds a day. This is what I'm really preoccupied with. So we need to learn how to manage planet Earth's resources. We need to work out how to exist on planet Earth without destroying planet Earth. It's as simple as that. In the UK, we consume 600 million tons of products a year. And we generate about 200 million tons of waste a year. And the construction industry is responsible for 60% of that, 120 million tons of stuff. And I've got the CEO of Berkeley Homes telling me at the moment that they don't make or create any waste. The UK construction industry, including the operation and maintenance of the built environment, consumes 60% of all products and accounts for 45% of carbon emissions. Recent statistics. Consumes nearly all the world's cement, a quarter of the aluminium, half of the steel, and 25% of all plastic. And this has got a little bit better. 5 or 10 years ago, it would have been for every 5 houses built, 1 house worth of material went to landfill or incineration. Now it's for every 6, maybe 7 houses built. But it's 1 house worth of stuff is going to incineration. And we've only got 1 planet. And we're being encouraged still to frack our way out of recession. So what do we do? Well, it's not all bad. Since it's been around, the world's number 5 economy, California, and New York State, the day after this guy decided to pull out of the climate change protocol, they got together and decided to ignore him. And a lot of people are ignoring him. And by the way, the US isn't out of the climate change agreement yet and can't do until the year after next. But maybe we should do that. And that's basically what most of humankind are doing at the moment. But there is hope, and that's the currency we're dealing with here today at Green Architecture Day. We hope we can take a breath and pause to remind ourselves, to paraphrase Professor Michael Braungart, who wrote Cradle to Cradle, that humankind is part of planet Earth's natural ecosystem. We are not alien to it. We have a hugely disproportionate negative impact on our planet, but we have the collective knowledge and know-how to make the decision to work in harmony with our host planet. And some people are doing really good work. I actually was going to not talk and just play her TEDx talk, which is just cuts to the chase, but I thought a lot of people have either seen it or could see it. So go and see Greta's presentation. You can go across the courtyard and see this building. Now, the reason we did this was 2 or 3-fold. I'd spent about 15 to 20 years working with locally sourced, non-toxic organic materials, creating buildings, and one of the reasons for doing that was hugely reduced carbon impact, but also for the issue of healthy buildings. And instead what I did here in 2014 was to build basically a constructor building that was basically a toxic dump. And it's made out of 90% material discarded by others. We were trying to prove, and we did, that the material that normally gets thrown away on a construction site could actually create a passive house standard building. This building creates 30% more energy than it consumes. It was built by over 360 students. It was on site for only a year. But along the way, we were working with Kath who's either here or over at the Waste House today. And she said, why not raise awareness of what Bryn was talking about, plastic waste, the stuff we throw away on a day-to-day basis. So it sort of became a polemic rather than this is how you should construct buildings. So it's a learning tool proving that there's no such thing as waste, there's just stuff in the wrong place. And we got a lot of students and across the road from City College, as well as our own students, and that's the summer school. We had a lot of school kids visit, and they started bringing plastic stuff. And basically the waste house became a vessel to contain this stuff that most people think is either not around or never even thought about in the first place, like 25,000 toothbrushes collected from Gatwick Airport in only 4 days. That's just from planes landing on one route at Gatwick Airport, and we were speaking to the cabin service company who collected those for us. And that's all Virgin Atlantic toothbrushes, hence the black and red. So we use these plastic materials as an awareness raiser, but also as insulation for the waste house. 4,000 VHS videos. DENIM, this is interesting. This is DENIM, which is part of a 21st century successful business plan. Import ready-made jeans from China, cut the legs off and sell shorts at festivals. So we've got 2 tons of denim legs. They're actually a very good insulator. Vinyl bags, my own bag is made out of these vinyl banners. I mean, we use them as a vapor control layer in the construction of the waste house. So what would happen is that Kath Fletcher would find stuff and I'd take either a minute a day or a month to work out what we could actually do with it. So this is one of the reasons I think designers can sort of unpack the problems, is because we know how things are put together. So we can unpack the problem. We can design out waste. We can decide to select a certain material over another to create a thing, an artifact. We've got bicycle inner tubes for soundproofing, carpet tiles to clad the outside of the building with a fire rating. These are second-hand carpet tiles. And you get this other sort of thing that happens. We're using unusual material sources, and you get different sensibility, a different feeling to the architecture. It's got stories. This is upstairs. This is my colleague that teaches with me. He's a product designer. And it's also affected some sort of impact. So I wrote for the Government Office of Science a paper on the potentials of the circular economy in the construction industry. And that's the idea that buildings are constructed to be material stores for the future. So you don't stick them together, you don't make them as monoliths, you make them like Meccano, so they can be unbolted and reused again and again. So there's been quite a few different books that the Waste House has been in, and I wrote my own one. And the idea here was, I mentioned Professor Michael Braungart earlier, he wrote Cradle to Cradle with the subtitle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. And he would stand up and say, recycling and reuse is a waste of time, it will all end up in our oceans one day. You're only delaying the inevitable. But I actually thought there was some merit in recycling, even though it's rather basic. But I think if it's sort of married and partnered with cleaning up the environment, it's useful. Reuse, I think, is important. Reduce is where you turn up as a designer at a situation and you may not use any material, where normally you'd be compelled to use stuff just to get a fee. And obviously, step 4 is the holy grail of closed-loop systems, where there's no such thing as waste. So I'll just quickly take you through the sorts of projects that that were in my book, which I thought were interesting. And like I said, this is the basic one, but it's interesting because it involved the Sea Shepherd, which has been going around planet Earth's oceans for 40 years, chasing whalers. And on this occasion, it chased an illegal fishing boat. And on the 111th day, the captain of the fishing boat, it was a factory fishing boat, so it was huge, he scuttled the ship because nobody would buy his multi-million-pound cargo. And that was because they'd worked with Cyril Gutch, who's got a company called Parley for the Oceans. And what the Sea Shepherd did is collect 75 kilometers of illegal gill nets and turn them into training shoes with Adidas. The soles are made from ocean plastic and they're 3D printed, and the nets are there to be seen. There are training shoes sort of like this on the market now. There's quite a lot of companies that do artifacts made out of ocean plastic. I guess the issue is, how long will it be before one of those training shoes is washed up on a beach on the Ivory Coast or something? Because the point that the designer makes is if you know the heritage of the material, where it's come from, it might affect change and might affect the way you behave and interact with it. But even big boring companies like Interface, they're boring because nobody thinks about them, but they're supplying carpet all around the world. And for years, and Oliver knows more about this than I do in the audience, they've been making their product out of, some of their product out of nets collected on beaches in the Philippines, and the Ivory Coast and other places. And they've got hugely ambitious targets for making sure that the supply material for their carpets is either waste carpets or this sort of thing. This is a graduate student of ours who made coffee cups out of coffee grounds, looking for new material resources to make stuff out of. This is on the market. It's a GUMDROP bin, and there's a whole company called GUMDROP who make things out of waste chewing gum. And that's a chewing gum bin that, when it's full of chewing gum, gets taken back to the GUMDROP factory to make more chewing gum bins. So that's recycling, and recycling's all right, but it tends to mean that the material might have been at this level of sophistication and it's ground up, melted and what have you, and ends up there. Or in the case of nylon nets, it's reprocessed and ends up like a virgin material. But it's got a big carbon footprint, well, not necessarily big, but it's got a carbon footprint associated with it. So reusing things instead of recycling is a big deal. And these people do it quite well. ELVIS and KRESSE, they describe themselves as commodity brokers. KRESSE, a few years ago, got speaking to the London Fire Brigade about what they did with damaged fire hoses, and they realised that it was very difficult to do anything with them, and they went to landfill. It's very tough material. She now buys up the world's supply of damaged fire hoses around the world and turns them into luxury goods. So that's sort of locating a linear system and turning it into a circular one. She does that with 15 or 16 other materials as well. Reduce is even cleverer, in my opinion. It's turning up at a situation and deciding that perhaps you don't need to use a lot of new material to get what you need. And this is Lacatin and Vassal in Paris, who famously went to the mayor of Paris, and we said that tower block there on the left, we know you're going to demolish it. We know you've put aside 38 million euros to do that. We'll give you a new tower block for 2/3 the price. And they did that by removing concrete facade, one panel at a time, off the existing flats, and then bolting on this new winter garden. So the occupants of the flats, they stayed in the flats while this was happening, which is a big deal. The front gets taken off, this gets bolted on. And the significance of that was profound. So there the winter gardens going up, and that's before and after. So it's the same apartment, but before and after. Before, you've got small windows, lack of ventilation, lack of light, so you have to have lights on all day. You've got no insulation, you're overheating, or you're cold. It's grim. Take the wall away. You've got extended floor area. You've wrapped the building in an unheated but thermally sound insulating jacket. You've got loads of opportunity for ventilation, human controlled, loads of extra light, 40% saving in energy bills. This is sheltered housing for older people, and the sort of benefit to their quality of life is huge. And the local authority, Paris in this case, save money. In this case, this is about to go on site. This is by Oslo railway station. And what's interesting about this is an existing tower block that's being extended and refurbished from the 1970s. The thing that's most interesting is this statement. So that's about understanding your supply chain, and I could talk for another half hour about that project. It is all about designers understanding and knowing the people that supply the stuff for them. These people are really clever. They're called Rota. They're based in Brussels. And I knew them because they curated interesting exhibitions. But they now deconstruct buildings that other people would demolish. So you read that top left to bottom right. And some of that work is difficult. But they have the sensibility of designers and artists and academics, and they get down on their knees and get dirty, as it were. This is part of the World Trade Center in Brussels. It's being demolished. Oh, no, it's not. It's being deconstructed by Rota. So even these are the sorts of buildings that are creating a huge carbon footprint at the moment, that are consuming a lot of resources. Financial districts in cities around the world are throwing up buildings that no one really likes. They're statements, and they only last for 20 years because the people behind them, or the companies, have got money, and that thing on the right, for example, might have been all right in 1992, but it's not a good public image now, so it's going to come down. These buildings would have got refurbished internally every 3 to 5 years. So what Rota are proving is that this stuff does not have to be thrown away. And they have a website where you can buy stuff. Other people are finding other techniques. This is SuperUse who invented this harvest map idea. So you locate where your site is, where your building is, whatever your project is, and then you look nearby for materials. This might be, as I did for years, locally sourced organic, natural materials, or it could just be stuff lying around. I did an event called the Waste Zone a couple of weeks ago, and we had a consultancy there that had mapped the resource potential of the greater Amsterdam metropolitan district in terms of its ability to supply construction sites with materials. So Dr. Zoe Laughling last year on BBC4 dug up a landfill site that was 40 years old. Even the newspapers were in good health. Nothing had decomposed. So what we need to be doing is mining the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene being the human made layer of stuff that wraps planet Earth at the moment, plastic in our oceans, pollution in the atmosphere, cities, whatever, the stuff you're sitting on at the moment, we need to rework what's already been produced. We do not need to mine anything else. So, step 4 is the circular economy, the Holy Grail. This is a building from the year 2000, which is all about a building as a material bank or material store. Peter Zumthor's Swiss soundbox. It was a huge building, actually, a huge pavilion. Pavilions either get, at the end of an expo, either get bought up and put in a park somewhere, or they're put in storage, or they're thrown away. This one, at the end of its life, if you can have a really good look at the image on the left, you've got steel springs there, and at the end of its life, or its first life, the springs were disconnected, and there you've just got a pile of timber. And that was given away to projects across Hamburg. So in the circular economy, you've got 2 spheres. You've got the biosphere, which is where stuff is organic and compostable and can be designed to be reused again and again, but ultimately compost and food, organic food for the natural environment. The tech sphere is where everything else goes. And it's a lot of stuff that we use on our day-to-day lives. So it's that stuff where designers have really got to step up. So it's the designers of the products, the systems, and the materials to ensure that we can design things for reuse. And in the case of a mobile phone at the moment, 95% of it can either be recycled or reused. We just choose not to. So you need to design for disassembly, and you think of these technical things as nutrients. This is just one interesting project in Denmark. Traditionally, 20th century brick buildings were difficult to deconstruct. You can't really deconstruct them because the mortar's stronger than brickwork, so you just end up with rubble. But these guys, the Lendiger group, got to a 1960s brick building with an angle grinder, and this is on site at the moment. So that's a situation that would have normally been recycling, but is actually a reuse project. Actually, I haven't been there, so I don't know if it's that colour or that colour. I prefer that colour. So this is the really interesting stuff, growing buildings. And a lot of you may know this building, but it is still amazing by archetype. It's a new university building at UEA. And the first thing that Archetype did when they got the gig was to speak to local farmers and order acreage of crops. So this is just proving that the straw stuff doesn't have to be little buildings in one-off buildings. This is a proper university building. And what I like about this shot is that most of what you're looking at, apart from the glass, the electrical fittings and the hidden wiring and plumbing, services in other words, is compostable. The floor finish, the balustrade, the walls is compostable. This is compostable. So this was built by a practice called The Living. And it was a temporary building, but it was up for 6 months in New York. And those bricks are made of mycelium. So this is bricks that are grown, mushrooms. This is them being compressed. You've seen what the compressive strength here. This is something was called Hack the Root, and it was up in the Liverpool Biennial last September. So that is mushrooms at the end of the day. This is a bit more robust. This is silica, sand, and mushrooms. This is a slightly different concept. It's not a pretty building, but it's really interesting from my point of view because this is the ABN-AMRO Bank in Amsterdam, and this is their CIRCL Pavilion. This is their 18 million euro of CIRCL Pavilion. And it's completely influenced by a development up the road on a former shipbuilding site. The development's called De Kervel. And it's a collection of about 45 old houseboats that have been hauled up onto the land and turned into studios and cafes and stuff. And everything's a circular system. They deal with their own water, create food, power, the whole thing, the whole permaculture thing. And what was interesting is the ABN-AMRO Bank looked at that and they applied it to this building. So this building is a material store for the future. The insulation's made from DENIM from the employees of the bank, etc., etc., etc. But the most interesting thing is that Petron van Heel, who was the banker client for this group, he said, we have a portfolio, he said the sort of thing you'd expect a banker to say at first. We have a portfolio of 600 billion euros in terms of valued at that amount of property around the world that we're invested in. So we're a financial bank, but now we're also a materials bank. If you're designing a building and it's only got, and it's a financial plan for 20 years, because at the end of 20 years the building's probably going to be demolished, you're throwing away all that material, and the building is a deficit in terms of financial deficit at the end of its life. That's the current model. If your building is a material store for the future, you've got a financial asset. So even for the banks, this makes complete sense, as well as saving the environment. You hang around there because I've got to stop. 2 minutes. Right, we're doing research projects across the road. You'll see the waste house. We're working on all sorts of material flows and turning them into construction materials. So we've been working with duvets because everyone throws away a duvet, nobody reuses it. And we've been looking at how to turn duvets, which the ones we collected with Veolia, 3/4 were polyester and 1/4 with feathers. So we've got experiments with making feather boards and other waste materials from the Preston Barracks site. So we've used the waste house as the pilot scheme, the test bed, and we've removed some of the DVDs and video cassettes and replaced them with duvets that we're measuring at the moment in terms of their thermal performance. We were asked to find a difficult textile material and recycle it and turn it into insulation. What we did is find a textile material that already had a TOG value, which gives you its insulation value, and then just shove it in the cavity in the waste house. So that was reuse. And then rather beautifully, well, we're monitoring the performance of it. The BBC picked up on it just before Christmas. That was nice on radio and TV. But then we found Englishes throwing away 50,000 oyster shells a year. So another local waste stream, and we turn them into tiles. So the waste house has currently got these tiles on the outside. So the white ones are 100% waste oyster shells. The ones that have got a bit of pink in them have got masonry waste from Preston Barracks. And a lot of people are talking about it and getting interested. And this was 3 weeks ago at Future Build. So I curated this event, which is called it's the Zero Waste Zone, but they call it the Waste Zone. So we had nearly 60 speakers, a lot of them from the Netherlands, a lot of them in charge of the Netherlands and Amsterdam's hugely ambitious zero waste targets. So we got them over to talk, to tell us, in effect, how they do it. And that's where I want to end. It is quite positive. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of people ignoring the issues at the moment, but I guess you guys aren't those. So well done. Thank you very much.